where do your beliefs about money come from? Like, calling it out is sometimes that very first step, is realizing that the generation you were raised in has a huge impact on how you think about money. Your very first memories about money, most of the time, most of the people I work with come from their family. It's going to be hearing your parents arguing, or maybe it's a grandparent talking about, we can't buy this, or whatever it is. But family is the absolute strongest source of financial influence. How we now talk about money, think about money, act around money, our behaviors are being picked up by that next generation. However, your money story can be your limit, or it can be your leverage. Well, that's a limiting belief.
Hello, and welcome back to the Connected Mindset Live. I'm your host, Greg Tomczyk. Another beautiful day to be here with you guys, and another special guest with an incredible story that we're going to dive into here shortly. But one of the topics I've been passionate about throughout my career, from baseball to now being an entrepreneur, is leaving my legacy and finding ways to leave that legacy, both for my family, my brothers, my parents, but also my kids. Now that I have young kids, leaving my legacy is a different definition than I had before. And today's topic is all about kind of what that legacy could look like, and how do you kind of leave your generational imprint on the kids that you have. Really looking forward to diving into that. Julia Myers, thank you so much for joining us. How's your morning going?
Oh, it's been fantastic. I'm so excited to be here, Greg. And hello to everybody out there. This is not going to be a boring Friday conversation. This is going to be one that leaves you energized. So I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm excited as well. Julia, one of the ways we like to start the show is, what mission are you on, and what are you hoping that each person listening in today walks away with?
Awesome. Well, I hope that everyone changes the way we talk about money. So my mission is to not just make generational wealth the household term. Everyone hears generational wealth. I want to reframe the story. I want the new term to be generational wisdom. So that's the mission that I'm on, is we talk generational wisdom at my house, at your house, at the dinner table. And it's not just about the money. And I say that without the wisdom to manage it, it's playing the lottery. You're just leaving your legacy to chance.
Absolutely.
And then what folks are going to walk away with today is 3 practical, actionable ways to start the money conversation, to shift their mindset, and then also reframe some of the conversations that you will have probably today when it comes to buying something that you want or that you need.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love how tangible it is and actionable. We're going to dive into those 3. But before we get there, what brought you to that light bulb moment to say, this needs to be a conversation that the script changes, the way people think about it needs to completely be put on its head, and change the script around how the conversation starts? Because I know a lot of parents that want to talk about it with their friends, with their kids, with their significant others, but then we hit that wall of starting the conversation, and it gets very uncomfortable. So what was the light bulb moment that you came to where you realized this conversation needed to change? And then how did you go about kind of that uncomfortable process to change it?
Oh, such great questions. And many parents are not alone. So I'll start with a piece of data that only 24% of parents regularly talk to their kids about money. So if you're part of that 3/4 that doesn't, you're not alone. And you're now empowered with the knowledge to say, I want to do something different. And that light bulb moment for me was at this point in my career. I'm a pharmacist by training. I was leading a team. I was finding great success in my personal life and my professional life. And I experienced a sudden, spontaneous retinal detachment. Lost sight in my right eye. And typical to those prescriptions on this TV, the messaging that says, if you experience sudden changes of vision, please contact your doctor right away. Well, that was me, guys. And I was not rushed, the next day was emergent surgery to try to fix this retinal detachment. And I looked down at the consent forms, and the consent forms really were like, are your affairs in order? What do you want to do? And then there was a question that said, how clearly and confidently can your family articulate your wishes? And it just like stopped me in my tracks. It's this light bulb moment of, well, I know that I've built a legacy. I know that I have what I want in mind to happen, and I have the logistical pieces in place of if anything happened and I didn't wake up from surgery. But that light bulb moment for me was, how clear and how confident am I that they're going to be able to live on beyond me or outside of me? Well, little did I know that that would be the first of 5 surgeries in a 18-month process that was never really able to restore my vision or the use of my right eye. It was the end of my career, but it was the light bulb for what I feel that I'm truly called for, which is helping people say, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but until you have those behaviors to back it up, it's just knowledge.
Yeah.
That's what I am on a mission for. That's what made me realize that, talking about money is not something that we should do someday. It's something we should do every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it, has gained this, money gains a cloud around it, or a lot of the serious topics, money, politics, religion. When you talk about it, people have different views on it, especially kids. Maybe they say, it's easy to make, or it's hard to make because of the way that their friends talk about it. So when you start to talk about the knowledge around it and then the habits to put it into place, how do you establish a foundation of understanding and wisdom and knowledge that people can take action on, whether it's a young person or an older person that's trying to overwrite the mindsets that they have from those lack of or bad childhood conversations that took place?
That is a great segue into a story. I was working with a group of young people that came to me for, money mastery for teens. And I asked the room, I said, what do you think of when I say the word money? And everybody kind of at the tables was green stuff or credit card or buying or spending or investing. And they were nouns, they were things. And then I asked the back of the room, so the adults in the room that were facilitating this workshop, and I said, okay, back of the room, you get to participate too. What do you think of when I say money? And you know what? They didn't say nouns. They didn't say things. They said feelings. They said shame.
Yep,
They said weight. They said debt. They said pressure. And so there's some point in our development, we want to be treated as adults. And then we wake up and we realize, oh, now we're adulting. And it's not what we thought maybe it was, or it feels so different. And so being able to identify and then separate, is this what I'm thinking about money is a feeling? Or is this just a physical transactional thing that is a tool that helps me get to where I want to go? So before we even talk money, I like to go one layer earlier and say, where do your beliefs about money come from? Like calling it out is sometimes that very first step, is realizing that the generation you were raised in has a huge impact on how you think about money. The silent generation, so that oldest generation that's kind of living right now, they know the Great Depression. They know not to trust banks. Mm-hmm. That's so very different than today, where all of a sudden we're like, invest and put all this money in a digital world. And we've never seen or touched money unless you have to. And counting money is stinky and gross. So think just generationally how much has changed with the way we do piggy banks. And now it's digital savings. So generationally, those influences are really big. We also can think about the very foundational of our influences can come from our culture. What does culture say about money? What does culture say about what it represents? And before, it was maybe contentment. There was a season of contentment where you had a house, you had a car, and 2.5 kids, and that was the American dream. And now your American dream is, who knows what, because you're now being compared to all these other things around you. So instead of contentment, we're now in this consumerism mindset of comparison. So the cultural, like where you think about money is absolutely what shapes you. And then socially, debt used to be a really bad thing. Debt used to be something you never had or you never would do. And now socially, it's absolutely go into debt for your education, go into debt for the things that you want because you might not, need to know how to pay for them in the future, or 4 easy payments for $99 will get you this new thing that you want. And I think it's important that we step back and we say, okay, where are those influences coming from? And what do we want to do with them? Like you said, it's rewriting. Some of those influences may be very helpful. They may shape our legacy in a way that, my dad gave us $100 bill when we graduated from high school. And it was the first time I had ever held a $100 bill, but we had to earn it. We had to promise to never smoke.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we got that $100 bill, it was this huge moment. And I've now continued that with my kiddos, even though a $100 bill now is maybe a little bit different than what it was. So I think the beliefs start the money conversation, and having that self-reflection to be like, what do you think about money and where does that come from? And that fourth and final most influential piece is your familial influences, your family influences. Your very first memories about money, most of the time, most of the people I work with come from their family. It's going to be hearing your parents arguing, or maybe it's a grandparent talking about, we can't buy this, or whatever it is. But family is the absolute strongest source of financial influence, which is a blessing and a curse for those of us that are now adults leading the next generation, whether we're coaches, whether we're parents. It's how we now talk about money, think about money, act around money. Our behaviors are being picked up by that next generation. So
Absolutely.
4 ways that I like to get started talking about money actually has nothing to do at all with the dollars and the cents. It just is thinking about where we got to, and everyone has a story with money. However, your money story can be your limit, or it can be your leverage.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have we heard, I started with nothing, so therefore I'll never be nothing, or I'll never be anything? Well, that's a limiting belief. Or you could say, I started with nothing, and look, I've launched and I've learned and I've done the grind, and now I have leverage to get me to never being in that place again. So that would be maybe the first place that I like to start.
Yeah, I think a lot of people describe, show me your bank account and I'll show you your mindset, across your life, because it does dictate quite a bit when it comes to, the mindset you have, whether it's scarcity or abundance, and vice versa. I know my grandparents looked at money as something that's very tangible. It was something that they had in their wallet. They, were able to go into the shoebox and find their savings or something they buried. And when I think about today, a lot of it's intangible. I'm curious if you've kind of seen that shift from the appreciation side, when something's so intangible and it's just a number in a bank account versus something you can go to a shoebox and count, how that has impacted the appreciation around money, which is, how we treat money is how money's going to treat us back.
Oh, that's so good. And this is one of my favorite things to do when I'm working with a large audience. And I will stand up and kind of say, all right, pretend you were going to pay me. Let's go ahead and pull out how you'd pay me, or show me how you would pay me. And I usually get 4 answers, 4 responses. Like visually, if you asked your grandparents to pay you, they're going to pull out their wallet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And write a check. Write a check? You think Gen Z is writing checks? They don't even know what check ledgers are. That's just how we do things differently. And then we have another generation that will pull out their wallets and pull out a credit card or a debit card or anything plastic, right?
Mm.
And then Gen Alpha, so those youngest generation, you know what they're doing? They just showed me their phone. They didn't even reach their hand in their wallet because they didn't have a wallet. They just had a phone. So in one room, one audience, we had 4 different ways that people were paying. So cash, check, card, digital. So I think just identifying that how we think about that actual transaction needs to be a conversation of, yes, you might not be able to touch it or see it or feel it. It still represents something. And it represents something that you give it power to, or you just say, hey, this is something I need to be wise with. So you talked about, oh, well, show me your bank account and I'll show you what's important. I actually say the very first question that families can do to talk about money, if you've never talked about it, or maybe you talked about it and then you're backing up because you're like, ooh, that didn't go well. I'm going to give you a pass. You don't have to say the word money at all, but you can say, show me your schedule and tell me what it says about our family values. Because your schedule is really closely correlated with something that kids can understand. It's not a concept that you wait until college to figure out value and money and ins and outs. Like, they can understand pretty early. If you say, we've got 3 minutes until we're out the door, they know what 3 minutes is. And so when we compare our money to something transactional like time or attention, it becomes something that we quantify in a way that is more relatable and understandable, even if it is not anything we've ever touched before.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of how you describe the time, the schedule, because I was a economics major in college, and we talked a lot about money is really just a store of value, and it can be compared to time and attention, which is huge, and something that I try to kind of give to my kids. They're still very young, but I just think about, if I make it too easy for them, where I don't describe those types of how the transaction happens, how the value is created, how money's made, and then how it's spent, and trying to convey those complex topics to them, it seems so overwhelming to be able to describe it to them, because I'm still trying to understand it, as a 30-year-old, kind of marching forward, and in my age now, I should probably understand it better than I do, being a college graduate, getting out of student loan debt, running a business. I understand my business more than I understand the personal finances side, which is, I think, a lack a lot of people have. Even up to 50 years old, I think a lot of people that I talk to today are still like, I need to understand my personal finances better. I need somebody to help me. I need somebody to write the book on it. And you're marching down that avenue, and have through the talks that you give. I'm curious on the two stories that come to mind, kind of the two threads is, we didn't have a lot growing up. So, I want to give my kids, everything that I have, so that they don't have to live, that life that I lived. Or it's, we had a lot growing up, so I don't really appreciate money that much. And then maybe they go into debt, and then their kids get that story of, now we don't have enough. So it's kind of the two stories I hear a lot. And I'm curious kind of how you stop that generational track in its tracks when it comes to how you talk about money with your kids, and where you start, what age, what that conversation could start as, what the question you ask, all of those types of angles.
Oh, so many different directions we could go with that, and we don't have enough time to unpack it here. But what we can do is kind of go back to the beginning and the basics of, absolutely, inherently as parents, we want our kids to have it better than we did. And then at the same time, if we look in the mirror and we say, what shaped our experiences, what shaped us, what made us who we are, it's usually on the other side of challenges. It's usually on the other side of doing things that were hard, or learning lessons by doing and not just by learning about it. So I say financial literacy is something that schools are trying to do, college is trying to do. I think it's only part of the solution, because until you're actually applying those skills, like, you can learn how to play baseball on YouTube, right? You can learn the rules, you can learn the strategies and techniques, but until you actually do it, and do it in a safe and healthy environment, that's where we're really going to develop the confidence and those skills. So as parents, I like to say, what are the safe ways that we can teach our kids decision-making skills? I call that discernment. I have a whole framework around, when you're at the store and you want to buy something, like, how do you make that decision of what to buy or what not to buy? And it comes down to really saying, what are the values? What are the priorities? And then, money is the tool, but where does money come from? So if you asked your kids today, where does money come from? Can they answer that? So I would say that's a question everyone needs to ask at the dinner table tonight. If you're past that, what does our schedule say about what we value? Start there first. And please, if you have teenagers, don't do all of this all in one night, because you'll get nothing but eye rolls and attitude and shut down. So as a mom of teens, I know that that's usually the response, but it keeps them pretty engaged when you pull them into the conversation from a perspective of, I want to give you a challenge, and this is how you learn that lesson. And it's not just, it's given to you. So we as parents sometimes have to check our emotions and say, are we doing this to be helpful? And then the intention is helpful, but the impact that we're having is actually hindering their growth or their development. 32% of young adults still live at home or are financially dependent upon their parents, 18 to 24-year-olds. Not in my house. I don't want to be a statistic, and I don't think you do either. And yet that's what the data says. And so when we can step back and reflect and say, where did that come from? Well, it came from, well, I need to get them a credit card so they can earn a credit score. Well, I need to buy them a car because cars are expensive, so there's no way they'd ever be able to afford it. We have to reframe those beliefs. We have to reframe those scripts in our head to say, okay, what can we do to get the kids experience and exposure and skin in the game? So for example, we matched what our kids were able to save for a car. And then it's their skin in the game. It's not the bank of mom and dad that is never ending. It's little bits of responsibility, age appropriate ways for them to, maybe it's, hey, let's go to the grocery store and plan dinner. And then we've heard that exercise, we've heard that activity, and it's helpful, but I like to take it to the next level because I'm a little bit over the top and I want to do 2 for 1. I want a double header. I want to be able to really say, okay, this lesson was not only valuable, but it taught them something at the same time. So I take it to the next level by saying, you're in charge of planning dinner. Here's your budget, and you keep the change. So keep the change means they're all of a sudden, the light bulb goes off for them and they're like, wait a minute, I could buy this because it's easy to spend. Culture today, like we can spend very easily, like, well, I have 20 bucks. Okay, what else do I need to buy to spend the 20 bucks? But if you say, let's keep the change, now all of a sudden it's, we'll have to feed the family. So there's a need there. And maybe I want to have a beverage with dinner. Maybe it's a root beer float or whatever it is that the kids like, or sprinkles for the ice cream. I will see them put the sprinkles back and say, you know what, I'm going to keep that change and I'm going to do it towards a goal that I have. Maybe it was a savings goal, or it's just, I don't know what I want to spend it on, but I know that it's not on sprinkles. So that would be a really practical, applicable way. We do this on vacation too. So everybody gets to have spending money at the beginning, and when it's gone, it's gone. And that's hard for parents to say, oh, you spent it all on day one, I'm so sorry. Well, if you are not holding that healthy boundary, they're not going to learn. They're going to learn that you can just keep getting it if you don't have those, discernment or the discipline to do it. And then I have one that's a saver. He doesn't spend any money on vacation at all, and he just keeps it. And that's okay too. So it's embracing that those personalities and money types aren't good or bad. It's most likely going to be different than your style, in relationships. Absolutely. You meet the in-laws and then their approaches about money are so complicated and so different. Imagine what it's going to be like as you are raising those kids together. So I want practical, actionable ways to get extra value out of it. And it's the keep the change exercise and letting them be in control to say, you need to bring some skin to the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the decision-making process and giving them the exposure to that, because it's like exercising the wisdom and the knowledge you're trying to put, into their decision-making framework on how they think about money. And it's going to be different for everybody. I think that's such a key point for everybody to attach to, is it doesn't need to be the same exact belief about money for each person. I think that oftentimes as a parent, you think of it one way and you want to impart that on your kids because that's what you believe is right, as opposed to being adaptive and exposing them to different types of environments like vacation, like the grocery store, and then allowing them to make the decision, then being there to support them through it, to be a resource and kind of help them get to hopefully the decision that will allow them to keep the change versus mom, dad, I need more money to get this part of the dinner meal.
Yes. And when we really go back and we think about the question of where does money come from, I want to make sure everybody's got that solid answer. And I say it comes from creating value and solving problems. Creating value and solving problems. So sometimes when you're younger, you say money comes from hard work. Well, we can work really hard and be really busy and have nothing to show for it. So I want to up level that mindset that says, where does money come from? It's creating value and solving problems. And that practically means for our kids, we can approach it that way. When we talk about our jobs, we're not saying, I went to work and I made this much per hour. I mean, that might be a conversation you have in the future, but you say, these are the problems that I'm solving at work. This is the value that I'm creating. And this is why I am working, or this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so when we're talking to our kids about ways they can earn money, there are so many cool ways that kids can earn money. And it has nothing to do with chores, nothing, because 20% of the jobs today are physically involving our body, physically involving chores, if you will, at the adult level. So when we talk about babysitting and we talk about mowing the lawn, many parents start there and then they stop. So I want to encourage you, if you've started there, let's keep that conversation going. Let's find other problems for your kids to solve, other ways to create value. So we pay our kids to read and then give us a conversation about it. So as soon as they're able to read, 7 years old or so, I have my kids start with Who Moved My Cheese? It's a short, easy, fun read. They get some really old grammatical words that they're like, what does that mean? And then you have a conversation about it. And then we'll say, was that valuable to you? And then the quality of that conversation, that quality of the learning and the knowledge, that is going to help them in the real world, because 80% of the jobs are very cognitive. So they're both skill-based, but one is physical and one is cognitive. So I think that as parents, what are we preparing them for to launch into the real world, the adult world? Well, we need to get them to think on their feet and solve problems. I pay my kids to do customer service calls. Heaven forbid they use their phone for their phone, right?
Yeah.
So that could be another one is, hey, I need you to call and get this bill paid because something happened with the bank account. Or, hey, can you log into this account? Here's how you pay a bill. Do kids learn those practical, actionable steps? And then they see the water bill or the electric bill or the cell phone bill. They're like, oh, okay. So I think the pendulum swung from, we're not talking about money because money is maybe an identity, or money is happiness, or money is success, but money is taboo, to now we've completely lost how we're teaching the skills of adulting. And I think that is where we as parents can really step in and serve our kids well by showing them under the hood. You want to be treated like an adult. You want more responsibility. Okay, then that comes with it.
Wow. Yeah, I've only heard of the chores angle. I mean, that's what I did as a kid. It was, if I did a chore, then I was rewarded with some type of money or meal or some type of decision I would normally make solo by myself, and then the other people would do it for me. So it's kind of that value being put back into me based off of what I was doing physically. I know a lot of people in the audience are probably going to ask, what are some other examples of, paying to read, helping with customer service calls, anything else outside of that? Because I think when kids get to a certain age and they can talk back and you're like, I want you to do this for me. And, then you can go out with your friends and, go to the movies or, go get a meal out. You get the pushback, and then you try to make it easy. Oh, if you just wash the dishes, or if you just clean my car, something of that nature. It's kind of like the easier route because it's kind of that tangible aspect. But zooming out a little bit, I think those types of strategies that you discussed around reading and some of the things we really want them to do, but they don't want to do it, but they want the end result, which is the money or the treat.
There's two things that make that successful. So the first thing being, they might not want to do it, and welcome to adulting, right? There's hard and harder. I think the fallacy is that there's a hard choice and an easy choice, and then if I just pick the easy choice, then that leads me to easy. No, it's either hard now or hard later. And reframing it in that way. I will also say that the more responsibility kids have for their own decisions and their own, specifically around money, the better. So we give our kids, for example, a back to school shopping budget, and then they spend it how they want. And when it's gone, and they've got to come up with the rest. So it may be the case where the kids are like, well, I don't need to read because I don't need money because you buy everything that I need or want for me. Well, let's get them in the game of, have you ever seen the birthday parties, right? And the kids open the gift and then they toss it. And they open the gift and they toss it. Imagine you as the kid at this party, you had to buy that gift with your own money. You give it to that friend, you are watching them open it. You're engaged, you are proud of it, instead of like, oh, mom and dad ran to Target on the way, got a gift card or got a gift, and here's your gift to give to your friend. So let's have them not only have a want to earn money, but a need to earn money, because you need to be able to support the lifestyle that you have. And that's a big misalignment I see in a lot of families, is your lifestyle doesn't match your income.
Yeah.
If you're confident that that lifestyle is what you want, then you've got to get an income that matches it, or we've got to shift some things. So we do a big disservice with luxury college housing, with granite countertops, with tanning beds and fitness gyms. And then you're like, what about having roommates? And so the expectation versus the reality, the disappointment that's in there. But if they know going in, hey, I am working for this because I've had to earn it, it just is more of a maturity skill and a lifelong lesson for them. So I think that would be the two important points: is it's hard and harder, and then it spends differently when it's your money. And if we don't give our kids any incentive to need money, then we're not going to be able to teach these lessons. And it's not mean to not buy your kids stuff that they want. Like, I'm not saying don't provide them their needs. I'm saying the things that they want, help them decide, do you really want that? And okay, how long are you willing to save for it? Instead of, oh, okay, we'll put it on the Christmas list and we'll get it for you next year or something.
Yeah, it takes me back to the concept of if you pay, you pay more attention. And I think that's something I have in my business, because I could very easily do something for free, but most of the time they don't pay attention to it. They just want it done immediately. It's just like the transaction of, mom and dad, I want to go to the movies, can you give me $20? And it's, they want it immediately versus I'm going to do this, this, and this so I can go to the movies. And that $20 will be a result of what I did to create value for my parents. And that's just a huge mindset that I know I wish I had earlier on. And it's no fault of my parents. It's just they didn't get taught it, in their younger years. And it really is taking us to this concept of generational wisdom, because once you feel and you shape that mindset, it's almost like in the next generation, it's going to be much easier to make that just the operating model of how you think about things and how you operate normally, versus having to do all the hard work you've had to do to break the chains of the money conversation you had. And majority of people have those negative scarcity chains in their mindsets. And that's really what we want to help folks connect to today. What would you say is a place to start? I think a lot of people listening in today, they don't have the conversation. They don't know how to do it. Obviously, we want to start with values and schedule, and then really try to put them in situations where they're challenged to make decisions. When they go to the table and ask those questions, what are the biggest struggles that you've seen, whether it's in your own family or with the families you've coached? Biggest struggles that they're probably gonna face and that they should anticipate having to address head on?
Oh, I think it starts with the adults and the partners. So whether it's your spouse or your partner or whatever, being on the same page about money. How in the world can we expect our kids to understand our mission and our, united front as parents if we're not in sync with each other? So whatever it takes to get on the same page with your partner, and not just a budgeting, a B word, but where do we choose to spend our money? And are we happy with that? Are we satisfied with that? Does it fill us in a way, or is it spending in the source of comparison? And once you look at those steps, then we can start talking to our kids. I think 3 practical ways we can kind of reframe those conversations. How many parents have heard, well, you're rich, you can buy it, we can afford it. So parents, be ready for that. And then my favorite response is, I'm rich, you're not.
Yeah.
Or I worked for this, what are you willing to do to work for this? And then they're like, whoa, what do you mean? Like, that's just not given to me. And it's like, in our family, we prioritize A, B, and C. And so if you want this, let's go ahead and say, which one of the other things are we not going to do? It's a trade-off rather than I want this and I can't have it. So therefore I'm empty or I don't, no, you chose to do it this way. So in our house, it's really crazy. We have 2 teen drivers that bought their car. My husband and I share a Honda Accord. We don't care about cars. We just don't really. I don't drive a lot. We've got 3 kids at home that go to and from things. For some families, they really value cars, or some people, and that's okay. It's just not important to us. But you bet we do lounges when we travel, that we do, different travel experiences and excursions. And we very clearly explained why we made that decision to our kids of, hey, we don't eat out much. And when we do eat out, it's when we're traveling and it's when we're on vacation. And they see that because we're verbalizing the thought process behind it. So that's a great way to kind of reframe that question of, well, do you want it or do you need it? Okay. And then what are you willing to do for it? And then another one is, I could never save that much money. So you now push it onto your kids of, hey, you're going to need to buy your prom ticket, or you're going to need to buy or have in reserves your car insurance deductible, because you will have an accident. And then that's the last thing you want to do is have the kid call you and say, I'm in an accident, but I don't have enough for the deductible. Okay, what are you going to do as a parent? Well, if it's already too late, then you say, okay, what are you willing to do to earn it or work for it? Or how long are you going to do something to pay it back? So putting them in the driver's seat to not just assume things happen, but that things are planned, where you pay to pay attention. So I think those would be maybe 3 ways to kind of reframe that conversation of, I could never save that much. Well, how much is it a day, a week, or whatever? You're either going to read a lot of books, we're going to solve a lot of problems. One thing I didn't talk about that's one of my favorites is watching TED Talks. So YouTube is a tool, right? YouTube, the internet gets a lot of bad rap for, brain rot for our kids. Well, let's teach them how to use it with wisdom. Okay, well, let's find a TEDx talk on something you're interested in. Let's see if we can find one that's done by a kid your age. Let's watch that. And then let's talk about that and let's create value in that way. What's a skill that you learned or took away? So those would be ways to very quickly get them engaged in the game when they're choosing what to do.
Yeah, I love the recap strategy that you use, whether it's watching a video, reading a book, and kind of paying them to recap and think through the thought process around it. I think that's so important, and how you continue to verbalize what you prioritize. I think a lot of times, we say it once and we hope they understand, and we have to reiterate it. Are there other ways to reiterate it, other than verbalizing, like, writing it on a board or putting it in their journal, or like things of that nature that you found have worked besides just, reiterating it until they understand it through verbalization?
I think it comes from doing it. So if when you're doing that thing that your family values and you call it out, they can now put a physical experience, they can put a place and a time and all of their senses into, oh yeah, remember when we were here and we were doing that. So in our family, service is really important. And at a certain age, the kids actually get to pick where their charitable money goes, their charitable time goes. And then we will say, hey, mom's going to serve at this kids camp, or mom's going to volunteer here because that's important to me that I spend my time and my money there. And then we'll reframe it and say, remember, this was important to you. And that's where your money went to, put it in the bell ringing thing or whatever. So calling out in the moment cements that conversation happened with a place and a time.
Yeah, that's how we remember things, right? With the different, what we hear, what we see, what we feel, where we are. So I think that's important as well, as opposed to just making it a dinner table conversation that it doesn't leave the house. I think that it's hard to learn something and for it to sink in, especially for the different minds that we have at the table. If we're just talking about it in a boardroom or at a kitchen table, and then when we go out into the world, it's not verbalized because we're just taking the action and hoping that it'll resonate with somebody by watching.
Yeah, I'm going to give everybody the breakdown. It's 20% knowledge and 80% behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So I also think it's important to call out, as you talk about money, your kids are going to ask questions. Your kids are going to be curious and not maybe know some of the social norms or social constructs or social influences around money. And we say that our dinner table is a safe space. We can talk about things here, and there will be times that those conversations need to stay here. And we want you to feel comfortable, and you can ask us certain things. One of the questions I got recently was, are we rich? Are we rich? And then parents never answer the very first question. You answer with, well, what do you think rich means? And then they're like, blah, 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 blah. And it turned out, and you're like, we're rich. You're right. Because we have control over our time. We are confident in the choices we make. We feel healthy and happy and safe. And that is a rich life. Where my first brain bells were how many commas are there? Or how many assets are there? And that's actually not what they were asking at all. So always turn around and try and say, well, what does that mean to you? Or what do you think? And then they love to share their ideas, because you're like, how are all these kids that have heard the same thing from the same people coming up with different answers? Welcome to parenthood.
Yeah, I recently had Marcus Sheridan, who's a part of our community, on the show, and he's a communication expert. And he mentioned, excuse me, a lot of the times we give the answer we think they want to hear versus actually asking them, what do you mean by that? Or what does that word mean to you? Or tell me more. And I think that opens it up to a conversation around, maybe rich to them was, is our garage organized, or do we have food on the table, or are my parents able to take me to school? And we go right to money, and maybe they were asking about something else. And it really dictates a young person's mind when we go right to money, and that is now how they think of rich, versus we're healthy, happy, we communicate, we love each other, and that's really rich to a lot of people. But when they think rich wealth, like you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, they think just about money and not about kind of the wisdom and the lessons we impart.
Yes, exactly. That's another one that I say is a great place to start, is normalizing a money conversation by just saying, would you rather be rich or wealthy? Mm-hmm. That's a whole conversation you can have with a lot of different angles, a lot of different outcomes, a lot of different perspectives. So would you rather be rich or would you rather be wealthy? And it also cements a mindset of abundance, of I get to choose. I get to choose how I think about it. I get to choose how I approach it, instead of saying rich or poor, because we're saying now one's good and one's bad. Mm-hmm. It's not good and bad when it comes to money. It's just one or the other. And it's neutralizing that money conversation. It's taking the emotion out of it. And it's getting more to the core of, how many people have made it in the world because they won the lottery and they're miserable or they're unhappy, and then it's all gone. Well, we all say that we would do it differently, but would you? Would you rather be rich? Or would you rather be wealthy?
Absolutely. What do you see as the difference between riches and wealth? I think those are two things. Oftentimes, most people just go to the money piece. Like, rich is up to $1 million, and anything after $1 million is really wealthy. And I don't think those are really the definitions that you probably talk to. What do you see as the difference for your mind, but also for younger minds, and how do we describe the difference between the two?
Ooh, I think it differs based on each person and their value set. And then I'll also say that it used to be that 1 million was wealthy. And now the data just came out and it said it's actually 4.5 million. is the net worth that you need to be considered wealthy. And then anybody up to 10 million is considered super affluent,
Super fluent. Yeah.
not
Wow.
wealthy, but super affluent. That's like the term of it. And then you have, centimillionaires and decamillionaires. Now we're like notching it up there, but it used to be that a six-figure job was like you'd made it. It used to be that $1 million meant you made it. And so if you're approaching, I want to be rich as a finite number, you may find that the world has either passed you by or that you end up disappointed, not out of any other reason than you didn't shoot big enough. And that's a mindset thing. Like we all can be reaching for that piece. And for me, rich is kind of that vehicle or that tool that is money. And then wealth is my cup is full. I'm abundant. I am able to pour the extra into other people with my time, my attention, and my money. And so to me, wealth is more of this feeling and this journey. So we talked that money shouldn't be a feeling. Well, when I think about wealth, I think of abundance. I think of contentment and I think of creation, where when I think of rich, I think of accumulation. But how many of the boomers out there and the Gen Xers that are in retirement are like, I spent my whole life accumulating and saving, and I did those things. And now, how do I shift my mindset to de-accumulating? It's just very, very interesting to see. So I think rich and wealthy can be defined differently by each person. And it really starts to help you reflect on what do you think is important and what do you think is valuable? Because rich is relative. I mean, we're speaking English, we're in America, and we're rich and wealthy compared to most of the world.
Yes,
And
we are.
in perspective.
Hmm. I love how you describe that because, the traditional path is, get to 65, you accumulate all these things, and then you find a way to enjoy them later. And it's kind of the opposite, or it should be the opposite. It should be you're building wealth and maybe you're accumulating some things that are valuable to you that fill your cup up. And that's really that more holistic approach. And I think a lot of people listening in today are looking, to be wealthy, not just monetarily, but throughout their entire life, relationships, health, all the above. So I think that's a critical point. Julia, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Before we ask our final question, how can folks engage with you, connect with you, continue the conversation? Because this is something we could talk about all day on the show.
Oh, well, I am honored to be here, honored to continue to share real world in the trenches money conversations with my family. And I do that on my website is probably the best way to find me. So Julia Myers, JuliaMyers.com. And for a great free resource just for your audience, I created 5 money conversations that you can have, or prompt questions. Because sometimes you're like, my intentions are there, but what's actionable? I gave you 5 kid-tested, mom-approved questions to ask about money at juliamyers.com/talk, TALK. And I would love to know your thoughts. I would love to know what worked for you and maybe some other ideas you have of questions to ask around the dinner table about money.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll definitely make sure those are in the show notes for people to take advantage of and connect with you. I think questions are the best answers. I always say that, whether it's in my personal life or business, that if I'm not asking questions or the right questions, then I'm in a world of confusion and unclarity. And when I can ask those right questions, those 5 questions to my kids, I can start to help them gain clarity, which will help, me gain clarity on how I can groom them and treat them and grow them into individuals that can contribute to people around them, create value, which will help them be wealthy in the future. And that's really, the generational impact that we each want to have. And just amazing how you've been able to translate and describe such a complex topic that it impacts each and every one of us. It's not something that, just impacts the elite or just impacts the poor. It's really something that impacts each and every one of us. So really glad to have you on the show, Julia. One of the ways we like to wrap up each and every show is, what does connection mean to you today?
Oh, connection means to me today energy. energy. So is this something that gives me energy in through that connection, or is this a connection that is maybe draining or taking energy? And so the connection is that conduit, I think, of whether it's between people or relationships or situations or nature. Is this, something that is energy filling or energy draining?
I love it. Yep, completely agree. And Julia, thank you so much for coming on the Connected Mindset Live, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Oh, Greg, thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day and go talk about money.